I had no idea that this was such a big deal.
The world believed they knew Sean Connery, the fearless screen legend with the unforgettable voice, the powerful presence, and a charm that made him one of Hollywood's greatest icons. But after his death 3 years ago, stories slowly began to surface that painted a far darker and more complicated picture behind the fame. For decades, Connery lived like a man untouchable by criticism, admired by millions, while carefully guarding the secrets hidden behind closed doors. Now, shocking revelations from old interviews, former colleagues, and people close to the actor are forcing fans to question everything they once believed about him. Some describe a man consumed by pride and control, while others reveal moments of anger, controversy, and private behavior that Hollywood allegedly protected for years. The deeper people look into his life, the clearer it becomes that the real Sean Connery may have been very different from the legendary image the world celebrated. And as these dark secrets continue to emerge, fans are left wondering whether the icon they admire was truly a hero or simply a master at hiding the truth. For years, Hollywood protected its biggest stars behind a wall of glamour and silence, and few names stood taller than Sean Connery. To the public, he was sophistication and strength combined. The original James Bond, the man whose confidence defined an entire generation of cinema. Audiences saw the tuxedos, the awards, the red carpets, and the worldwide fame. But behind that legendary image, insiders now claim there was another side to Connery that remained hidden for decades. And after his passing, more voices than ever begun speaking openly about the uncomfortable truths they once stayed silent about. Many people who worked around Connery describe him as intimidating in ways that extended far beyond the movie set. Directors reportedly feared confronting him. Producers avoided arguments with him, and younger actors often felt overshadowed by his dominating personality. In Hollywood, power can silence criticism, and Connery possessed enormous power for most of his career. Stories began resurfacing about explosive tempers during filming, clashes with studios, and a reputation for refusing to back down from anyone who challenged him. Some colleagues admired that toughness, calling him old school and fearless. Others, however, saw something darker beneath it. A man who enjoyed control and expected people around him to accept his behavior without question. Point one controversy that refuses to disappear involves Connery's past comments about women and physical discipline in relationships. Decades ago, during interviews that shocked audiences even at the time, Connery made remarks suggesting that hitting a woman under certain circumstances was acceptable. Although he later attempted to soften or explain those comments, the damage never fully disappeared. In today's world, those statements have returned with renewed outrage, especially as younger audiences rediscover old footage online. Critics argue that Hollywood excused behavior from powerful men simply because they were successful, charismatic, and profitable. For many fans, hearing Connery calmly defend such views shattered the heroic image they had carried for years. Former interviewers later admitted that even they were stunned by how confidently he spoke during those moments. There was no hesitation, no sign of regret, only certainty. That confidence disturbed many people because it suggested those opinions were not accidental mistakes, but deeply rooted beliefs. Supporters of Connery insist that people should judge him within the standards of his era, arguing that society was different during the height of his fame. But critics push back, pointing out that even during those years, many people strongly condemned such attitudes. The debate has continued long after his death, turning Connery into one of the most divisive legends in entertainment history. Behind the scenes, rumors of strained personal relationships also followed him for decades. Some reports claim Connery's intense personality made life difficult for people closest to him. Friends described periods where he withdrew from others entirely, becoming distant and emotionally cold. Fame often creates isolation, and those near Connery allegedly struggled to break through the wall he built around himself. While fans saw confidence and charisma on screen, insiders sometimes described loneliness, stubbornness, and emotional distance away from cameras as his career grew larger. So did the myths surrounding him. Hollywood transformed Connery into more than an actor. He became a symbol of masculinity itself. That image made studios billions, and many believe executives had no interest in allowing controversies to damage it. During the height of his Bond fame, newspapers and entertainment media were far less aggressive than today. Stories that might dominate headlines now were often buried, ignored, or quietly managed behind closed doors. Powerful celebrities lived in a world where public relations teams controlled narratives, and Connery reportedly benefited from that system for years. Yet despite the controversies, there remained something magnetic about him that audiences could never fully resist. Even critics admitted that Connery possessed a rare screen presence impossible to imitate. When he appeared in films like Goldfinger, The Untouchables, or Indiana Jones and The Last Crusade, he commanded attention effortlessly. Directors often said the camera simply loved him. That natural charisma complicated everything, because it made people willing to overlook behavior they might condemn in someone else. The same charm that built his empire also protected it as newer generations revisit his interviews and personal history. Many are struggling to separate the artist from the man. Some longtime fans refuse to accept the criticism, arguing that Connery's contributions to cinema should not be erased by controversial opinions or personal flaws. Others believe celebrating him without acknowledging those darker aspects would ignore serious issues. This conflict reflects a larger cultural shift happening across entertainment. The reevaluation of legendary figures once considered untouchable. People close to Connery during his later years claimed he became quieter and more reflective with age. After retiring from acting, he spent much of his time away from Hollywood's spotlight, living mostly in privacy. He rarely gave interviews and appeared increasingly detached from the industry that made him famous. Some interpreted that withdrawal as peace and contentment. Others wondered whether he simply grew tired of defending himself against criticism that never completely faded away. There are also persistent whispers about professional conflicts hidden from the public during his peak years. Several filmmakers reportedly found Connery difficult to work with because of his stubbornness and refusal to compromise. Stories circulated about arguments on set, disagreements over scripts, and moments where his temper allegedly created tension for entire productions. Yet because film starring Connery usually made enormous profits, studios tolerated behavior that might have damaged another actor's career. One former production insider claimed that Connery understood his value better than anyone. He allegedly knew studios needed him more than he needed them, giving him enormous leverage in negotiations and on set. That power reportedly allowed him to challenge directors openly and demand changes others could never request. While some admired his confidence and professionalism, others saw arrogance and intimidation. The darker side of fame often remains invisible until years later, when people feel safe enough to speak honestly. After Connery's death, former interviews, archive footage, and behind-the-scenes stories spread rapidly online. Younger audiences unfamiliar with the carefully protected Hollywood culture of past decades reacted with shock. Many could not believe some of the statements and behaviors once tolerated from major stars. The internet transformed old controversies into modern headlines again, ensuring Connery's legacy will remain under intense scrutiny long after his passing. Despite everything, there are still countless people who defend him passionately. Friends describe moments of generosity, humor, and loyalty that the public rarely saw. Some colleagues insisted he treated crews with kindness and respected hard-working professionals on set. Others argued that Connery was a complicated man shaped by a different generation and harsh upbringing. These supporters believe reducing his entire life to controversies ignores the full truth of who he was. But critics respond that talent and success should never place someone beyond accountability. They argue that Hollywood spent decades protecting powerful men while dismissing concerns of others. In their view, revisiting Connery's history is not about erasing cinema history. It is about understanding it honestly. The debate surrounding him has become symbolic of a much larger conversation about celebrity culture, power, and the dangerous consequences of idolizing public figures without questioning them. Even his legendary role as James Bond has become part of the controversy. Bond himself represented an older style of masculinity, confident, dominant, emotionally detached, and often dismissive toward women. Some critics believe Connery's real-life views blended too comfortably with the character he portrayed on screen. Others argue audiences are unfairly projecting fictional stereotypes onto the actor himself. Regardless, the connection between Connery and Bond remains impossible to separate. As documentaries and biographies continue exploring his life, new details keep emerging that challenge the carefully polished image Hollywood created decades ago. Some stories may be exaggerated, while others appear deeply credible. The truth likely exists somewhere between admiration and condemnation, a complex portrait of a man who became larger than life, while carrying flaws many people ignore for far too long. In the end, the story of Sean Connery is no longer just about fame, movies, or awards. It has become a story about power, image, and the secrets hidden behind celebrity culture itself. His life reminds people how easily charisma can overshadow controversy, how fame can silence criticism, and how legends are often far more complicated than the world wants to believe. Even 3 years after his death, the conversation surrounding Connery continues growing louder, darker, and more unsettling with every new revelation, and perhaps that is the most shocking part of all. For decades, millions believed they knew the real Sean Connery. Now the world is beginning to realize they may have only known the version Hollywood wanted them to see. What makes the situation even more unsettling is how many people inside Hollywood allegedly knew pieces of these stories for years, but chose to remain silent. In the entertainment industry, silence can become a form of protection, especially when enormous money and global fame are involved. Sean Connery was not just another actor. He was a global institution. His name alone could sell movie tickets across continents, and studios understood that damaging his image could cost millions. Because of that, some critics believe the industry intentionally avoided challenging him publicly, allowing controversies to fade before they could seriously threaten his career. Several entertainment journalists later admitted that celebrity culture during Connery's peak years operated very differently from today. Reporters who pushed too aggressively risked losing access to stars, studios, and exclusive interviews. Powerful actors often had teams dedicated to controlling public narratives, and negative stories could disappear surprisingly fast. According to some former insiders, Connery's reputation was carefully managed for decades, especially when interviews or comments sparked backlash. Public relations experts allegedly worked behind the scenes to shift attention away from controversy and back toward his legendary status as a film icon, but the modern internet changed everything. Old television appearances that once vanished after airing are now instantly accessible online. Younger audiences can watch Connery's controversial interviews themselves rather than hearing filtered summaries. And for many viewers, the shock comes not only from what he said, but from how casually and confidently he said it. In an era where celebrities are scrutinized constantly, those old clips feel almost surreal to modern audiences. The reactions online have been fierce, with debates exploding across social media platforms every time another interview resurfaces. Some fans still defend him by arguing that he was brutally honest rather than politically careful. They claim Connery came from a generation that valued toughness and blunt speech, even when opinions sounded offensive by modern standards. Supporters also point to his difficult upbringing in Scotland, where poverty and hardship shaped much of his personality. Born into a working-class family, Connery experienced struggles long before fame transformed his life. Admirers say that background created a fierce, uncompromising attitude that later defined his public image. Yet critics argue that hardship does not excuse harmful beliefs or behavior. They believe too many powerful celebrities have hidden behind the phrase different times whenever past controversies return to haunt them. To those critics, Connery represents a larger problem inside old Hollywood, a culture where charisma and fame often mattered more than accountability. And because he remained admired for so long, many feel the industry never truly forced him to confront the impact of his words. Another mysterious aspect of Connery's life involved his growing distrust of Hollywood itself during his later years. Toward the end of his acting career, he became increasingly vocal about frustrations with the film industry. Some people close to him claimed he felt surrounded by dishonesty, greed, and manipulation. Others believe his withdrawal from acting reflected deeper personal exhaustion. After decades under global attention, Connery appeared to lose interest in fame altogether. He stepped away quietly, avoiding interviews and rarely appearing in public. That silence only added to the mystery surrounding him. The less he spoke publicly, the more speculation grew. Rumors spread about hidden conflicts, damaged friendships, and unresolved tensions behind the scenes. Some former colleagues hinted that Connery could hold grudges for years, cutting people out of his life completely after disagreements. Others described him as intensely private, a man who trusted very few people and revealed almost nothing about his true emotions. Even within his personal relationships, there were whispers of complexity that fans never fully understood. People close to him describe moments where he could be warm, funny, and deeply charming, only to become distant and impossible to reach emotionally. That contrast fascinated many who knew him. It was as though two different personalities existed within the same man. The charismatic icon adored by millions, and the guarded individual constantly keeping others at a distance. His marriage also attracted public attention over the years, especially as controversies resurfaced about his past statements regarding women. Critics questioned whether the world ignored warning signs simply because Connery remained one of cinema's most beloved stars. Some argued that his fame created a shield few people dared challenge directly. Others insisted that outsiders could never truly understand the realities of his private life. AS documentaries continue examining old Hollywood culture. Connery's name frequently appears in conversations about masculinity, power, and celebrity privilege. His version of masculinity once represented the ideal for millions of men around the world: confident, dominant, fearless, and emotionally controlled. But modern audiences increasingly question whether that image carried darker consequences beneath the surface. Some believe Connery's legacy now reflects a rise and fall of an entire era's definition of manhood. Ironically, the same qualities that made him unforgettable on-screen may also explain why controversy continues following him after death. He projected certainty so powerfully that audiences wanted to believe in him completely. Whether playing spies, detectives, or heroes, Connery carried an aura of authority that few actors could match. But when controversial comments and darker stories emerge, that same confidence